Good morning, everyone, and welcome to A Vision for the Future, hosted by the Waterford Local Enterprise Office. I'm Sarah King from Virgin Media News, and over the next 2 hours, we're going to be having an in-depth conversation about the future for Waterford. We're going to be hearing from Waterford's greatest creatives, policymakers, thinkers, entrepreneurs about their ideas and thoughts for the future. As we know that COVID-19 has changed our lives, and in many ways it has changed it in the sense that it'll be different as we move forward. But we are looking ahead. The vaccination programme is rolling out and the country is preparing to reopen throughout this year. So we're going to take a look at how that future is going to look for Waterford. Particularly, we're going to look at the next 20 years and try to examine what it is we need to do in order to make Waterford a place that people can really put on the map, be a primary place for business and for people to ensure a better life socially and economically. So we've got a number of panel discussions happening throughout the morning and up till 1 o'clock. We will give you an option to ask questions. We're not going to do a Q&A in terms of people putting their hand up and speaking on camera. So you'll be able to field your questions through the chat box and you'll be able to send those in through to us. So we'll put those to our panelists. Also just to say that we are recording this event as well, and it will be shared on social media at a later stage. So if you miss anything or if you need to go and answer another call, you can catch up at a later stage as well. So grab yourself a cup of coffee, sit down, enjoy the conversation. We're going to start first this morning with a panel on innovation and creativity. So we have 3 panelists joining us for that. It's Miguel Ponce de Leon from the TSSG, Larry Breen, Chief Commercial Officer from Nearform, and Brian McGee, the Development Director at the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland. But we're going to start first with you, Miguel, this morning. Good morning. How are you?
Sarah. Oh, very good, Sarah. Very good.
Good, good. So Miguel is going to talk to us about mobile technology in Waterford in the years ahead. So take it away, Miguel.
Thanks a million. And I must say thanks very much to you for the introduction, and also to Richie and Breed and the team in the Waterford Leo for giving us this opportunity to be able to, I suppose, accentuate the innovation and creativity that's happening here in the Waterford area. Just to say for myself, I'm the Technology Gateway Manager here in the TSSG. This is a technology gateway that interacts with the research community of Waterford IT, particularly around computers, computer systems, and mobile technologies. I've been in the ICT industry now about 25 years and seen many, many changes over that time. And actually, in fact, before I talk about the future time for technology and the impacts it could have on Waterford, I'd like to maybe just go back maybe just for a second. And if we think about what was hot as topics maybe 5 years ago, we would have maybe thought about virtual reality or wearables or Internet of Things, which, okay, may be something that we see quite often at the moment. But if we think maybe 10 years ago, we were thinking about mobile wallets. We were talking about mobile gaming. We even talked about the cloud 10 years ago. Well, okay, so those are things that are starting to hit businesses today in some way, shape, or form. If we think about 15 years ago, and that was where we talked about the wireless internet. We talked about video on demand, video calls through your mobile phones. Imagine a number of the panelists here today are using their pads and using their phones to be part of this webinar, something that we're only thinking about 15 years ago. And maybe to connect that with the TSSG has been here in the region of Waterford, God, over nearly 20 years now, as it so happens. And what we do is we carry out groundbreaking research about looking about how software, how internet-based technologies can impact and help businesses. And if you think about, things that we're working on today are going to hit in 15 years' time. The types of stuff that we're talking about now is interacting with drugs that help people from a technology perspective, that interact with your phone in some way, shape, or form, that interact with agri-tech or agricultural technologies to help with food production. We're very much looking at machine learning. And the reason I mention these types of topics is because with the TSSG, we're going to essentially grow into a new entity, the Walton Institute, as it so happens here in this month of March. And this isn't just a brand changeover. This is international recognition of the work that's been happening here in Waterford, researchers in Waterford, in and around software technologies. And this type of research is of access to you, to the audience here, to every SME, from the startup, if you've got the basic startup idea, if you are a micro SME with a couple of employees, if you're an enterprise SME and you've been around for a number of years yourself, we are actually here to help. We've worked on some of those older technologies that I spoke about at the earlier part of this presentation, we have expertise of having worked with it, even failed with some of it, and kind of have some ideas of how it might help your business as you are looking to integrate webinars into your technologies, as you're looking to integrate mobile payments into your mobile apps, as you're looking to add virtual reality and things like augmented reality into your applications. This is something that you can gain access to from right here in Waterford. We have 80, yes, 80 researchers that are available. Some are doing postdoctoral research, some are doing master's research, but a vast majority are carrying out what we would call commercial research to help you with your business ideas, and to bring a technology head to it. As such, we are the ICT R&D arm for the Southeast. And there are mechanisms through your local Leo office, as well as Enterprise Ireland, to gain access to feasibility grants and innovation vouchers in order to interact with us. So there are grants as small as a couple of €1,000 up to a couple of €100,000 to help and interact on the topic of software technologies, and how they can help you in some way, shape, or form. I mean, now I would say, Zara, look, they would be the main topics that kind of cover. I mean, I haven't strictly said anything about, mobile technology. We can see more than anything that this is progressing, but I think one or two of the next couple of panelists will go a little bit deeper about how it's affecting today's commercial world.
Definitely. And as you mentioned there, I think we're all relying on it now more than we ever did. And it's something that we probably didn't even consider, that we'd all be sitting together like this on a video meeting. It was sort of seemed alien to people before now, but it's really bringing us, and it's in the present as well as the future. So it's an absolutely key part of it. Thank you for that, Miguel. And I know there'll be lots of questions for you, so do stay with us. And we're going to call in now Larry Breen. Larry is the Chief Commercial Officer with Nearform. And a lot of you will obviously know Nearform because they are the brains behind the COVID app, which is their big project this year. But Larry, you're going to talk to us about what happens after COVID, what companies like Nearform will be doing in order to further contribute to society's future needs.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. Again, from that point of view, a little bit sort of where Miguel kind of kicked off from. If we look back before we look forwards, COVID came along last year. It's been really hard on lots of different folks, on a personal basis, business, economic, and from a government response point of view. But one of the advantages that's come out of COVID, and at Nearform, we've been able to kind of embrace that. We've been very fortunate.
Oh, we seem to have lost Larry there, or is that just my connection here?
No, I'm still here.
Oh, you're still there. Great. Go ahead, Larry. Go ahead.
Okay, Zara, no problem. So from that point of view, is we've been able to obviously embrace the whole COVID change. And what we're looking at is, if we look before COVID, there was already a move towards digital and innovation and transformation. We see a lot of things changing in our lives, and Miguel kind of touched on it. If you go back, 10, 15 years ago, smartphones weren't really a thing. I remember one of the first companies I set up and run, we were using, feature phones. That's what they were called at the time. Very limited capacity, little 64K apps. Very slow connection speeds, and you could do very limited things in terms of them. We thought it was super sophisticated. Now, 15 years on, we've become, very sophisticated, and the majority of us center our lives around those actual phones and those actual devices. It's the same with all technologies, and that trend was already moving. What we saw with COVID is, as soon as COVID came on, is digital became more prevalent. So those in society who were shying away from it, who were nervous, who didn't really understand it, or hadn't made that investment to jump into it, COVID forced a lot of those folks, both businesses, governments, and individuals, to actually step up to the plate and embrace what technology and innovation can actually do. And what we've seen coming out of COVID is we've seen that kind of acceleration. Now, the COVID app, Zara absolutely pointed out, that was a project we were really lucky to be brought into. So working with the HSC and a whole bunch of other folks, we were able to come together and get that product out to market and out to the population in Ireland, and then take it internationally. So it's the widest used COVID tracking response app globally. That's great. That's a lovely project for us to get involved in. And we continue to expand on that with the whole immunization management. And now we're getting into conversations around digital passports and certifications and verification codes and all that kind of good stuff. And we're going to see that as COVID is, here and now, it is unfortunately going to be part of our longer term horizon. We'll get ourselves out of, the main lockdowns and the main impacts of the pandemic, and the pandemic will be over, but it will have a follow-on to that, and obviously we'll deal with that in that kind of way, which is fine. But what it's demonstrated to the market is geographically it doesn't matter where you are. So Nearform, headquartered in Tremor, we're proud to be a local company, but we've got folks spread across 21 countries worldwide. We don't recruit based on geography. What we're recruiting on is based on talent. So what we look for are the best of the best. And we spend a lot of time within the whole development community making sure that we got those high-end engineers, and we bring them together to deliver projects wherever, from the Middle East through Europe, all the way to the US and Asia Pacific region. So from that point of view, for Waterford, it starts to open everybody's mind to the fact that, we are playing in a global market, and we can do that quite comfortably from Waterford and Tremor in the southeast of Ireland. And we've got a lot of great companies out there like ourselves, like many of the other panelists. Sandra Whelan's coming up shortly, with VR Immersive, again, bringing the whole world together and making it a much, much smaller world, and using that innovation and technology to actually drive forwards. What we're going to see is that whole pace of change continue to, that acceleration. Once upon a time when you engaged in the public sector and you wanted to put a project in place, it was a 3 to 5 year endeavor. What COVID has shown both governments and companies such as ourselves is, as we did with COVID and the HSE, we were able to stand up a project, with Nearform's help. We were able to get the initial prototype of the COVID app up and running within a matter of days. Within a few months, we had run it through its paces, done a ton of testing and verification, and got it out to market, and it's now starting to have that kind of impact out there. The same is true of other technologies, and we're seeing that change from an enterprise position worldwide. Is folks really want to start moving fast and change their habits, and what they want to do is take all of that kind of mundane stuff and let's put it into that kind of bucket, using technology and innovation to actually drive forwards and free up our time to actually get more involved in the things that are meaningful for us in life. And one of the learnings a lot of people have taken out of COVID is, if we push to one side the hardships of it for a second, what it's also done is it's got us to focus on enjoying our time with our families, with our friends, being able to do things when, we're restricted, we're stuck, at the moment we're in this, limitations of life. But even within that, is we're finding those areas that we want to concentrate our time on. As soon as we get through this, and immunization will obviously take us down that path, and suddenly everything opens up, we won't be going back to normal, we'll be going to the new normal. And the new normal will have that desire, is to be able to have that free time to spend on it. And that's where technology and innovation are really going to come to the fore. We see that especially within the whole health space. So again, from a health space point of view, is digital just makes sense. There's no need for, letter appointments coming in and out and people being delayed. We've seen it in terms of how people manage outpatient appointments and other elements that sit within it. I was in the hospital the other day with somebody, taking them to an outpatient appointment. Normally you go in, there's hordes of people jammed in every corner of the corridors waiting for their appointment. There wasn't. There's very little people in there because they're moving them through. Again, they're using technology, they're using those learnings. And we're going to see that continue. So we're going to see life evolve. And again, we've got to get out of COVID. We've got to build on top of the changes that have actually happened for positive, overcome some of the challenges and the impacts that it's had on society and individuals. But I think ultimately, once we come out of it, we'll build for it. And ultimately for Waterford, with the help of local enterprise office and the council and Enterprise Ireland, etc., we're able to really build a solid tech community, really solid businesses in the Southeast that can not just service the Southeast from Waterford, but can actually deliver those solutions, as we've proven, on an international basis. Back to you, Zara.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Larry. And what's really exciting about the way you talk about it? You're so passionate about it, but also the fact that you talk about being a Waterford-based company with a global market. And that's really exciting. It's about sort of changing one's mindset and imagining that you can be a business, as you say, based in beautiful Tremor, where you can take your lunch break on the beach, but also have, as you mentioned, 21 countries engaging with you as a business. So I think I know there'll be loads of questions about that. So thank you very much for that. Next up, we've got Brian McGee. Brian is there. Brian is the Development Director with the Design and Crafts Council of Ireland. You're going to talk to us, Brian, about the creative spirit in Waterford and how can we encourage it and I suppose commercialise it for the future.
Correct, yeah. I'm just going to share my screen, Zara, if that's okay. So can you see that? Is that coming up?
Yeah, we're good.
Yeah. And I'm going to go to this little guy here. So is that working?
Yeah, that's working. That looks great.
Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about developing Waterford's and Ireland's creative entrepreneurs.
Sorry, Brian, that's you're not on full screen there.
It's not full screen?
No.
Okay. How's that?
No, not yet.
Okay. Screen
You just
sharing.
stop sharing and reshare again.
Okay. Is that it?
No, not yet. Do you want to just stop your sharing?
Okay, stop share. Yeah.
Yep. And just reshare.
Reshare. Okay. Whatever's wrong with Zoom. Apologies, everybody.
There we go. That's it.
Okay. Okay. So apologies for that. So before we start, I suppose we're talking really about the creative sector and creative businesses, and they can be often, very small. Certainly when they start out, they often be one person, two person companies. And just an inspiring quote from a lady from County Wexford who became one of the most important designers Ireland's ever produced, and one of her chairs sold for I think a world record of $20 million or something there a couple of years ago. To create, one must first question everything, and creative people are always questioning things and trying to find new ways of doing things. And that's the space that we play in at the Design and Craft Council of Ireland. And we have enterprises that we work with across every county in Ireland, literally every single county, some more than others, and that's for a whole bunch of reasons. Obviously, Dublin is dominant in that. In Waterford, I think it's important to state that there's a great creative heritage in Waterford, going back for hundreds of years, and it's an exciting urban centre on its way up, and that got a lot going for it. It's lower cost for a creative enterprise to set up here because property is cheaper, and you can actually work in an urban setting somewhere like the Cultural Quarter and have a really good quality of life, both in terms of your work life, but also, as the previous speakers talked about, the quality of life of being on the beach and being in the mountains and all those things that Waterford brings. And that brings digital access to the world, because now I think, again, it's been said earlier, that with COVID and post-COVID, I think it's really clear that it's possible to do business from anywhere now. It's finally happening, and we've been talking about this. Miguel has mentioned we've been talking about this for a while. It's finally here. And I think the last thing really to say is the strong local and national supports. And I think the efforts here by Richie and the team in the local enterprise office will confirm the strength of the local supports, and then also the national supports through ourselves. And of course, as enterprises get bigger, Enterprise Ireland. We talk about a creative journey. I think, it's a bit about encouragement at the early stage for business. In the discussion with Richie about what this would be about, we talked about encouragement and then commercializing creative enterprises. It is actually a back and forth journey between encouraging and commercializing, because people need encouragement and help commercializing at every stage through the business development. But as we look at encouraging, we look at things like awards and competitions, looking for advice and entering development programs. This is really important for early stage businesses, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And then if we look at commercialization, trying to build awareness of who you are, your brand, trying to get active in terms of your selling approach and strategy, building your digital presence, and obviously when you get to a certain size, start to consider exporting. One of the awards that we have, that we run, which is a very lucrative award for college level kids coming out, obviously still in college or graduated or very, very new young creatives, is the Future Makers Awards and Support Program. And that's something I'd highly recommend that any young creative looks at. It's extraordinary to see the winners on this awards go on to be successful. I don't know why that is. I have no idea how it is that they seem to have something in them that drives them, but it has been a remarkable predictor of success. We also, obviously, for early stage businesses, have a lot of free stuff out there, and between us and the Leos and so many, other organizations, there's so much free information out there that I would recommend every young entrepreneur looks at, in terms of, the kind of things that they need to think about in developing their early stage business. And there are other things like competitions, and again, I really think it's important that people keep their eyes and ears open for these kind of things. They can often be very large prize money for these competitions, and they can really get you started in terms of working capital, but also getting your name out, getting you connected and networking into the enterprise sector. And then there are development programs, and this is one that we run with the local enterprise offices nationwide, called Building, Craft and Design Enterprises, BCDE. And this runs in regions or in counties where you get put together with 10 or 12 entrepreneurs and go through a year-long program in terms of how do you develop your business from the beginning. Again, I talked about brand awareness, and I think entering competitions, this is the Irish Made Awards, which is run through the Irish Country magazine. If you're a creative entrepreneur and you want to do things in Ireland, you've got to enter in things like this. Get your name out there. This is a company here, husband and wife company called Jando, and they won that a few years ago. And again, it's been a remarkable predictor of their success. But it just showed their courage and their sort of enthusiasm to enter this and to try to win. Selling is obviously really important, and if you register with Design and Crafts Council of Ireland, there are a lot of help, assistance there in terms of helping you to sell. Just showing there is the shop in Terminal 2, which unfortunately there are no passengers at the moment, but hopefully this summer they'll be back. But there are lots of places to sell craft or design if you produce in Ireland, and more places, hundreds and hundreds of shops around the country. The other thing then to talk about is digital, and I think this is really important. Digital is now kind of the basic ticket to the dance for any business that wants to sell to consumers or to trade. We're running an e-commerce bootcamp for businesses to learn how to develop their business to business or the business to consumer websites and how to go about it. But it's really important to try to access assistance for this. It's it's a fast moving area. You've got to be on top of it. The people who do invest the time and also invest the money are successful. It's actually remarkable to see how so many businesses, despite the lockdown, despite the fact that retail has been shut, so many businesses in our stable are ahead of the previous year for 2020, and it's all down to digital. And then eventually, I think we're going to see export come back again. This is really important as a business grows. Ireland is a small place. If you really want to grow, you've got to export. And we're now seeing virtual fairs building across the world. It's actually very exciting because it gets you the chance to go in front of buyers that perhaps you wouldn't have even thought of doing before because of the distance or the costs involved. And so digital is enabling this direct to business contacts to happen. And just to say one last thing just on success, like every business on this page started out as a one-person business with us at some stage in the last 8 years. There is, all of them are employing more than 10 people, all of them are exporting, all of them are, doing very well financially, but also creatively, and they're happy in their business. Creative enterprises aren't always about, having driving a Maserati. They're often more about fulfillment, quality of life, contentment, but also creative happiness, I suppose. And that's what a lot of these companies get, as well as employing people and delivering economic and cultural value to Ireland and their city. So thank you for that. My email details are there on the screen. So if anyone has questions at all, please feel free to get in touch.
Brilliant. Brian, thank you very much for that. That was excellent. So we're almost through with this panel. So we're going to take some of your questions. I see there was just one or two that came in through that. So we'll start with this one. Talent and human capital is key. How can Waterford make itself more attractive to lure talent away from Dublin, for example? Who wants to take that? Anyone? Any thoughts on that? No one's jumping at it. Larry,
Yeah,
Larry, maybe we might see. Oh yeah, oh Miguel, yeah, Miguel, go ahead there, yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, look, part of the stuff that we do, we're doing a number of European projects, so interacting on topics like neurological diseases. Those are diseases for the brain, but interconnecting technology and ICT in it. And we are the coordinator of the project, which basically means it's something that can be done from the Southeast. And you wouldn't believe the number of CVs that we've received over the last 4 to 5 weeks where people around the world want to be part of a project like that. Again, looking at how you could, kind of grow biological cells, but with those cells, put digital information in them. Again, just cutting edge world research is happening in the Southeast. And I think by that factor, it's a matter of being able to help people come into this area. And of course, it's a beautiful sunny Southeast as well. So, I mean, that's the key attraction, I suppose, too.
That's the key. That's our unique selling point. A question here for Brian. How is digital technology affecting crafting? Brian, does technology reduce or enhance human creativity?
Well, obviously, look, digital is ubiquitous now in every sector. In terms of craft and design, obviously the design process itself, as well as the production process, has got a huge amount of digital now embedded in it. And that's impossible now to separate. It's a great thing, to be honest with you. It's enabling the Western world, and certainly Northwest Europe to compete with the Far East and places like that, as you have the opportunity to present bespoke solutions to consumers and to retailers closer to the market. So it's a very exciting time, to be honest with you. I think digital is where it's at. It's also, at the end of the day, as I said, business to business is now possible. You can do business with a posh store in Los Angeles if you want now. It's possible. They're interested. They will talk to you. And your Instagram is everything. Your website is everything for them to be able to see who you are and what you can do. And I know it with Nearform. I mean, it's really remarkable how you guys, have used, your successes in one territory to move into other territories so quickly. And that's all digital, isn't it? It's how digital helps to share information.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting, Brian, that you talk about things like Instagram, because I think a lot of us have seen sort of really nice, unique pieces on Instagram, and that function to be able to go and buy something actually is very interesting, isn't it? Because it holds your hand the whole way through that process, so much so that your card details are automatically inserted, and all of a sudden you're buying a scarf from Donegal that you didn't know you wanted, but it's coming in 2 days, kind of thing. So it is interesting that that's a new way of buying. Even I've noticed that myself in the last years. That seems to be a new way of buying. Yeah, absolutely. Larry, a question for you coming in there. Is there any fear or worry that Nearform might eventually outgrow Tramore?
I don't know that we have to worry about it outgrowing Tramore. We'll continue to expand, and obviously we've made some recent press announcements and stuff about our expansion plans and what we're actually doing. Again, the whole premise I think we need to understand is more and more people are looking at working for companies regardless of where they're geographically based. So once upon a time, everybody had to go to like Dublin or London or San Fran or New York or whatever else. That's no longer the case. So even within Ireland itself, we're seeing more and more folks going, okay, I don't actually have to, tether myself to Dublin if I want to actually have a good career and a good job. So we're going to see a lot more expansion down here in Waterford and in the Southeast across all businesses. Again, with all of the things we're talking about here with the guys and some of the panelists that are kind of coming on, we have the ability to do all of these things now on a virtual basis. In my peak of the last sort of 10, 11 years, I was flying between 250 and 300,000 miles a year, going and visiting companies and staff and all over the world. In the last 12 months, I've probably done about 3,000 miles. And the success factors haven't lessened. If anything, they've actually increased. You're able to spend more quality time with it. So I think companies like Nearform will continue to grow. Will continue to grow on that international stage. There's no reason why, being headquartered and obviously our foundations here, for me, I'm a Tramore guy, born and raised here. Cian likewise, and part of the reason why he set it up here, but it doesn't really matter where you physically put your head offices to a greater extent. You're able to virtualize more and more of it out there. So no, I don't see us going anywhere anytime soon.
And so a final question just for me before we move on to the next panel, Larry. I was interested in wondering, because I know Brian's talking about, using Instagram and social media and things for business. And do you find, or do you have any advice perhaps for a lot of the small businesses who'll be watching today about in terms of developing their own app to sell? Is that something that you'd recommend? Should they be looking at developing apps for their business? I know sometimes, for example, if I'm clothes shopping and I want to see a selection of clothes, sometimes being on a website is quite clunky. It's nice to have an app. It's that really sort of contained environment where you can pick things and pop them in your basket and stuff. It's a little bit more of a contained. What advice would you have for small business considering developing an app?
Yeah, again, we got to bear in mind we've become a mobile society, so we all walk around pretty much anywhere. Everybody's got a phone in their pocket and they're constantly sitting there fidgeting and playing for it. You go down to Moe's on the prom here, you order yourself a cup of coffee while you're waiting for it to be delivered. You're fidgeting on your phone. So
yeah.
Apps are definitely garnering that kind of attention, and people are using their mobile phones. The more you can create a sort of seamless environment, frictionless, that's what it's actually all about. The great thing with some of the technologies, and Miguel and the guys at TSSG will talk to this, back in the old days of Feed Henry and whatnot, it was about trying to get new technologies. We're now in a position where, we do a lot of work with using certain languages that allow us to, build once, but deploy it across web and multiple apps at the same time. And it reduces the cost to actually serve and maintain those going forward. So there's great innovations happening in the technology. SMEs and companies don't need to worry about that. That's why, got boring people like us to actually worry about it. But the excitement there is it starts to create that plethora of choice, which they in turn need to put out to their customers. So again, that small shop or retail unit up in Donegal that you just bought something from, if they're sitting there with their door open and a beautiful shop waiting for you to suddenly drive all the way to Donegal to buy it, they're going to be a long time waiting. Stick it on an app, pop it up as an advert, bingo, you've got something. On Post will deliver it for your next day type stuff. Happy days.
And Zara, just on that point, I think it's really important to stress that you've got the technology side, but then you also have the time side and the management side. And I think it's really important that businesses remember, certainly if you're selling to consumers, but even if you're going B2B, that your content is really important. Investing in your content is really central, because if you're not messaging right, it's not going to land home. And the second thing is you got to resource it. So if you're a small business, you're starting out, you don't have a lot of money, get somebody, get an intern, get somebody to help, but don't under communicate. You've got to really get that right, get that messaging right. And I think a lot of businesses, I really, really hate to see it when you look at the news section on a website and it's something from 3 years ago, and it's just like, oh my God, you might as well just take the whole thing down, because it just means you're not current, and everything's about being current.
So I suppose with that said, then you think maybe investing in things like PR, or maybe investing, as you say, a younger person who's more tech savvy, who maybe knows a bit more about social media to help you to push that message. Because I think a lot of people will say they know their business is great, but if other people don't know, it makes no difference, sort of thing. I know, Miguel, you wanted to get in there, did you?
Well, it's along the same theme then as well. It's basically, I interact with a number of companies where the first thing they'll say to me is, I don't know much about technology. I don't know how to develop a mobile app. And what I always say is, don't worry about it. If you know, and you should know your business, and most people do know business processes, even how people will use their tools to purchase things, you've got great resources here in the Southeast to help you on the tech side. That will be one of the key messages, that we're here to help. Nearform, TSSG, and a number of other companies are also here to help the types of companies to bring the tech bit towards them and help them. Again, as Brian is saying, concentrate on the content, concentrate on the business process, concentrate on the profit and loss line. There's certainly people here to help on the tech.
Brilliant. And finally, so the logistics of getting to people like you is to apply through the local enterprise office. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Brilliant.
Direct connections. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, great. That's fantastic. Guys, thank you so much. That was very informative. Thank you to Miguel, Larry, and Brian for joining us. Really a lot of great takeaways from that. So thank you so much. We're going to move on now to our next panel. It is going to be Sandra, Heather, and Uriel are with us. We're going to be talking for the next half an hour a little bit about entrepreneurship and the difference that's going to make in terms of the future of Waterford. Hi guys, thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to start, hello, how are you? We're going to start with Sandra Whelan, who is the founder of Your Immersive, and Sandra is going to talk to us about mobile technology in Waterford in the years ahead.
Thanks so much. I'm going to speak a little bit more about, post-COVID and stuff. Is it going to be more physical or virtual? And just a little bit of my take on it. So suppose just to introduce myself initially, I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Immersive VR Education, and we're based out in the Clayby Business Park, but we have been remote since COVID kicked off. And we spend our time looking at ways that virtual reality technology can enhance new ways in which people can learn, people can collaborate, and people can communicate. And I don't want to hash over what some of the lads have already said, but I just wanted to reiterate a point that Larry said there. You know, being from Waterford from us hasn't been a hindrance at all. So when we began, it was asked, you know, it was suggested to us by a few people, you know, you're going to have to move to the US to run your business. But we saw a really big advantage of staying in Waterford, not only for personal reasons for ourselves with a young family, but from a cost perspective and what the Southeast has to offer as well, just in terms of a way of living, a way of life and a way of living. So as we're kind of using virtual reality day to day, we're maintaining that social connection. So there's really no geographical limits, and I can put my headset on with my team. I have a team of 60 people and they're based all over the world. And it's like we're all in the same room. So we're shaking hands and we're striking up hallway conversations. I have a meeting and then I can take off my headset and I can head out to the beach and go for a walk, you know. So what we've noticed is over the last 14 months or so, all technologies and VR technology have gained a vast audience through COVID. So people who generally wouldn't, my parents as an example, they're in their 70s. Until the COVID app came out, they had phones, but they didn't know how to use them. They didn't know how to download apps. They're now booking appointments, seeing doctors, having weekly Zoom meetings and stuff with the family. So people are moving towards using technology and they're not as nervous, I don't think, or as afraid of it as they were before. And it's also got an awful lot of massive benefits in terms of cutting out, you know, a lot of unnecessary commuting. No longer do I have to drive up to the airport at 7 in the morning to fly to London for a 1-hour meeting when the whole day is gone. But as we kind of look forward to this new way that we're going to be communicating, I don't believe myself that people in general want to stay at home indefinitely. So I think there will be a hybrid approach to how people are going to work remotely and to business in general. So what we're noticing on the virtual side of it is a lot of virtual events, a lot of companies putting in virtual offices, trying to cut out all that commuting time. And I think long term, people will be using virtual meetings, either 2D meetings or 3D meetings, and that's how things are going to naturally evolve. Now, if you go online at the moment and you have a look, you can see many different examples of various technologies being used to demonstrate tourist attractions and tourist destinations. VR and other technologies lend themselves very well to that. So I don't think for Waterford there's anything stopping us leveraging the technology that is available today to be able to showcase what Waterford has to offer. And a lot of businesses are now choosing, for cost reasons, to keep their offices closed now forever. So they're moving everything fully online, and those businesses are going to need support, I think, in their new way of life. So we would have seen yesterday all the bank branches are being closed. So everything is now going to have to move online. So in my head, I always do, you know, you start with the end in mind. So the talk we're having today is meant to be about, you know, blue sky thinking. And, you know, if there was no object, what would I like to see? So in my head, what I would like to see would be Waterford, say, becoming the county in Ireland for all virtual supports for all businesses. So maybe we could look at, I don't know if it's possible, it's probably not, but free broadband. Come to Waterford, train your staff here, no broadband costs at all. Do you want to train your support staff, open up a call centre in the new ways of virtual support? Why can't you come and do that in Waterford? Why can't you then send those staff back home once they've been trained in Waterford, maybe get some sort of discount there, strike up relationships with hardware suppliers, discounts applicable to companies that come through the Waterford tech ecosystem. I'm talking now 5 years down the line, I'm doing the blue sky thinking, what would I love to see? I would love Waterford to become the city where companies do all of their virtual training. We know it's going to stay around either in a hybrid form or some other form. We need to incentivize companies to do that. I don't know how we would do that. That's what we're having the conversation about. Reward companies to come and do that here and really use technology to our advantage at the moment to kind of showcase the city and create an environment where companies are thriving, they're connected, they're integrating with like-minded enterprises and individuals. And also I think that work-life balance as well is now something that we can put at the forefront. So, you know, we're often asked, there was a question like, how do we get people to come to Waterford and how do we incentivize them? And the only way we're going to do that is to showcase them, you know, what a fantastic place Waterford is to do business, the work-life balance you can have when you're here. And I think we have to use the new audience that we've gained over the last 14 months, people that up until last March wouldn't have been online, wouldn't have been on their phones, wouldn't have been downloading apps. We now have a new captive audience of people that we can start pushing out the message to them that Waterford is a great place to live and a fantastic place to do business. So that was really my input and my idea as to how I think in the future, if I had a magic wand and I could wave it, what would I like to see? That would be what I would like to see happen for Waterford.
And it's a very positive visual, isn't it, Sandra? And it is like that key question about like, how do you incentivize people to come? And like, as you mentioned now with this new digital era, is it making it that little bit more possible? Do we need to kind of switch the way we've been thinking about it all along and see if we can find a different way forward? So as others can be thinking of an answer to that maybe while we're chatting, and we might come back to that again later on. Thank you so much for that. And next up is Heather Reynolds. You'll know Heather as the founder of Tech. Heather, I think I interviewed you years ago when Tech first launched actually. So welcome, thank you for joining us. Heather is going to talk to us about the future world of work and what that might look like in Waterford.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. So you're actually going to be sick of talking about COVID by the end of today, because it's impossible to discuss the future of work and not reflect on the strange times that we're living in, and particularly when we have businesses closed around us and like we're contemplating a real uncertain future. And also as individuals, we've been by default forced to really reevaluate our relationship with work. And what does that work-life balance mean to each of us as individuals? And it goes without saying that the biggest trend to hit the workforce or the workplace in 2020 is remote working. And even though this concept has been around for years, and there's been people very fortunate that they've been able to work from home for many years, as we would have perceived it, COVID has actually just accelerated those actions and been a real big instigator when it came to this big change in its, as opposed to, as I should say, the change itself. So as a business or as an employee, we really had no option but to embrace the change, and including some real risk-averse sectors and maybe security-conscious sectors that, regardless of the consequences of this shift that we've been sort of forced into, had to move and had to move really quickly. But I guess what the shift that's happened in the last over 12 months now, it has forced us and the workplace to sort of reimagine what that future workplace needs to and should look like. And while there is like kind of major change, and some speakers have already touched on sort of things that are shaping the workplace from a consumer perspective, from an employee perspective, and even a business perspective, I've just touched today on just broadly kind of what I see as sort of two driving forces that are dominant in evolving the workplace and are really impacting that future workplace and work environment. The first being technology. And the technology, which I won't do justice to, and Larry and Miguel that covered it earlier are the experts in this field, but just to, I guess, broadly talk about the fact that 1 in 3 people today believe that their job could be replaced by machines. And 3 in 5 people believe that artificial intelligence and automation could improve their work performance. And while this technology has been developing for years, it has impacted our lives. And again, some of the other speakers have touched on this, be it, we'll say, Sandra's virtual reality development, but our social interactions, our buying behavior, the work conditions, and just interactions with businesses will continue to drive us as consumers and employees towards more digitalization, as we've heard already, analytics and artificial intelligence. And this, behind the scenes, of course, is a drive towards a business, from a business perspective, driving this competitive advantage and cost optimization. And there's no disputing there's definitely nervousness around that shift. And of course, obviously, even different demographics, there's a different uptake as we see with younger generations being much more tech savvy. But there are some concerns on the other end around data security and risk and just that fear of the unknown. But in reality, artificial intelligence actually is becoming very good at some human jobs. And today we can see artificial intelligence being used in diagnosing of disease. We can see it in the translation of languages even, and providing a field that I'm in, like providing customer service. It's been revolutionary in terms of what it's done over the last 15 years, and will continue to impact that significantly because it is improving really fast. So it is perfectly reasonable that there's some fear around that, artificial intelligence sort of coming in and how it could ultimately replace some human work throughout all economies in the future. Now, from a business perspective, the progressive and future thinking organization will embrace this transformation. But it is really important that the adoption of this is optimized. And, to sort of negate the fear of the unknown, the combination of human and technology solutions is what this is about. So how do they complement each other in the future? So it's about evolving jobs as opposed to replacing. And that's sort of how we need to consider this for the future. And interestingly, I think just specific around COVID, the absence of technology at the outset of COVID actually was a real big stumbling block for business and the pace in which they could adapt to the new normal that was kind of forced on us. So there's a bit of a scramble at the moment, I think, to implement some technology solutions without some in-depth analysis. And we just need to be careful, of course, that that doesn't have a negative impact in the future. The second perspective I just want to touch on is, I guess, us as individuals and the people perspective about how we feel about work and how that's also evolved and been reshaped over the last 10 years and will continue to do so over the next 10. So on a human level, the pandemic has enabled us to, as I've said before, kind of personally assess what life-changing decisions we're making. And, we've heard about, why Waterford and using that as your place of work is now more an option for people than ever before. And not just for a business to set up here, but for individuals to potentially be able to work anytime, any place and anywhere. And why not Waterford? And it is actually for the first time a realistic option. Whereas the concept of work from home before was definitely something that was, I have to still be kind of close to the office. So employers, positively or negatively, have had a real-time pilot test of the concept. And I think Sandra's touched on it there, this hybrid operating model, as it's known about now or talked about now, is about combining the traditional of what we see as I go to the office every day versus home working, and that employers need to be able to enable all options in the future and make sure that their environment is fit for purpose, regardless of where an employee decides to work from. And there is a little bit of a scramble there also, I think, in terms of maybe reforming some work policies to ensure that that is enabled and that there's no disadvantage to people who actually opt for either option. In reality, a sort of post-pandemic world, which we're all still unsure about, and I think it's also safe to say that we're not too sure how it's all going to fall. But certainly from a business perspective, the priorities will shift from where we are today around. There's a little bit of cost containment mentality and revenue protection at the moment, and in the future we will see a massive shift into revenue expansion and optimization. Now, they don't necessarily they do work together, but I guess it's just a big shift of the businesses that are looking to expand and go global and grow in the future. But there are some kind of factors that have also been underpinning, we'll say, the work environment and our relationship with work for quite some time, actually. And one of the challenges has been around genuine inclusivity of the workplace, and also ensuring that we have a diverse workforce. And that is going to become a real essential factor in the future. The second point would be around careers and longer lifespans are actually challenging the traditional ideas about careers and retirement age. And that means that as an organization or a business, I need to also make sure that I'm able to manage multi-generations without impacting pace or productivity at the same time. So that's just a consideration, I think, for the future. The third is the fact that as a result of the technology advances, that careers will become more complex. That goes without saying. And a trend that we've seen over the last 5 years, 10 years maybe, will continue in that people will change jobs more often. And I do remember the day, and maybe it's my, my own parents, when, the concept of leaving a job, 10 and 15 years ago was like, you're leaving a full permanent job. That just is unheard of. Today, the workforce is much more transient and fluid in terms of, I want to work for a brand and what I seek out. Small word of caution in terms of this, new world of this hybrid operating model, that the lack of face-to-face meetings and team collaboration and relationship building face-to-face and just general lack of engagement does not suit everybody. And it is going to have an impact on our general well-being. And we are going to have to consider, how does that work in the workplace? How do we make sure that people feel included? And that inclusivity point just comes back in there around, we all need to feel part of something to feel valued. Resistance to change, of course, and the fear of the unknown is not a positive culture. So I would emphasize here that the employee and the employer needs to be aligned on what that future workplace looks like. So we're nearly getting finally, but some broader considerations and just implications of kind of these changes, I just, as I see it. The first one is, and it's, a positive, but yet a negative, in that the only silver lining of higher unemployment in a community is entrepreneurship. And this enables a community it's a very powerful mechanism actually within a community to drive economic and social development. We need to make sure that we can enable this activity and make it flourish and thrive. And particularly, obviously, in Waterford, which has been very supportive through Leo in the past for entrepreneur activity, we need to make sure that we're ready in case when we all come out of this COVID scenario, that we're ready to support more so than ever any entrepreneurship activity. Would absolutely encourage it. I think Sandra touched on some of those blue sky thinking as well. Also touched on already is about the labour market, and this goes two ways. Ultimately, the downside of a kind of work from home hybrid model means that the labour market actually is going to get thrown open on both sides. So from an employer perspective, your boundaries are, there's no boundaries. You can recruit the best talent. I think Larry mentioned it. You can get skills from wherever you need to get them. Super. From an employee perspective also, I'm also then open to work. So people from Waterford can work anywhere, which again is great. How do we take advantage of that, I think, in terms of keeping skills and capability in the region and make sure that we're, on the map for that available resource. Statistics from a people perspective show that people are more productive at home, and we understand the boundaries are loose there at the moment, and all of that needs to be worked through. Am I working harder, or is it actually, I'm working longer? But in general, people are happier working from home and are maybe just having the option of doing it. But the concept of, making sure that a key element of business and competitive advantage is around innovation and calibration. To be able to foster and create,
yes,
really important. So I think that is just something that, again, businesses are going to have to consider. How do I make that work if I have a complete global workforce in the future to be able to get the most from the workplace? Job types. So there has been a shift towards jobs like risk mitigation, compliance, data security. They will remain central. But new technology, as we've talked about, will create new quality of jobs, and some jobs will inevitably go. And there's an interesting sort of snippet on this where 60% of the children today will work in jobs that don't currently exist, which is kind of difficult for all of us to, consider that, but that's what the future potentially looks like. So we're creating the future now by the advancements that we're seeing in technology. And green thinking, I should say, is going to be, as an employee, will form my decision on the type of organization I want to work for. And that is going to have a major influence over what companies survive in the future, and equally will be a dominant part of strategy. So finally, from me, with or without pandemic, I think there's a seismic shift in this working from home. It enables Waterford to become a location of choice for both business and potential employees. And so the right approach, I think, will deliver for Waterford kind of an era of quality of jobs and improved living standards. So that's everything from me. Back over to you.
Brilliant. Heather, thank you very much for that. You're so passionate about it. It's actually infectious, your passion for that. And it's a really interesting point that you make about how we work together with technology and people and how those jobs marry up together for the future. Thank you for that. Uriel McMurrough is standing by waiting to chat to us here, CEO of Nematon. Uriel, I suppose you're going to talk to us a little bit about the future of media in Waterford. Take it away.
Thanks, Zara. I'll try and get it done within the allocated time, although I have a fair bit to cram in. Just briefly, our company here, Nematon TV, is based in Ring in rural West Waterford. We have around 70 staff, mainly located here, but also on our base in Glasgow. Our main clients are TG4, RTE, Sky Sports, BBC in terms of broadcast, and in terms of web production, sports organisations like the GAA and other content for clients which we have worked with over the last 6 years in New York, like Adorama, who are a photography retailer. I'm going to share my screen now with you. I hope you can see it. Okay, so today I want to share.
I don't think we can't see it there, Uriel. Just try that again, maybe.
Okay, bear with me for 1 second.
Perhaps maybe Tom or Dean can give some advice. Oh, here we go. Yeah. So you can go into full screen mode.
Yep. How's that?
Yes, that's perfect. Take it away. That's great.
Good. So today I want to share my vision of what a thriving media industry can look like in Waterford and what that involves in producing content for people to consume in their homes and devices all over the world. To do that, I'm going to introduce a fictitious character. We have to give her a name. I'm going to call her Fionnuala. If there are any Fionnualas at this meeting, please bear with me. The character is entirely fictitious. So we have to just go back a little bit before we can go forward and imagine that not so long ago, Fionnuala would have been a consumer of newspapers, would also have sat down around the television with the family. Remember when we all used to do that, sit around the television and watch it together, and would also have listened to local radio. In terms of the timeliness of that consumption, it's hard to believe that at a time when newspapers were widely consumed as the main source of news, one would have to wait a whole week to get a roundup of the local news, sport, and everything like that. Even if you bring it forward a bit and you think about consuming news on television, you would have to wait a whole day generally before you could tune in to the evening news to see Zara and our colleagues and other channels to get a roundup of the day's news. Or even, I suppose it sounds very outdated now that you tuned into local radio every hour on the hour to get your news, whereas now it's all just gone so instant. So in that time, what has happened since we all did that not so long ago? Well, Fionnuala has become a creature of need, needing everything so instantly that she has become a dopamine addict. And she wants instant gratifications in terms of likes, shares, news and sound bites. And she is a voracious consumer of content on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, or whatever you're having yourself. But what happens when Fionnuala gets sick of all this meaningless drivel that we see and seeks more worthwhile media rather than the tsunami of rubbish that's constantly available these days to feed that dopamine addiction? And further, what happens when the surveillance economy of Facebook and Google comes to a shuddering halt, as it will? She'll start looking for things of relevance to her, and she'll look in a completely different direction, and the internet is already being shaped to cater for her. Video is already becoming the main mode of communication, if it isn't already, but we're only at its infancy. If you can imagine where YouTube and others came from, you can see that they have already shed their image of dogs on skateboards, and Facebook Live is even now becoming a vital tool of commerce for small businesses. And the convergence of media has already started, as TV, newspapers and radio are all now media companies, each of them doing written stuff, video and audio. And this is an indication of what's coming. This is the future. And so what does this future look like, and where does Waterford fit into it? So before long, and we're very close to this now, people won't know where their content is coming from. They won't know whether it's coming from Sairview or satellite, from cable or streaming. They will just press a button on some device and their content will appear on something as small as an Apple Watch or as big as the 50 or 60-inch screen that you have in your home. And in that environment, national media organizations will eventually fade into the mix of everything else that will be available. New channels will emerge based strictly on interests. So instead of seeing Gardening with Diarmuid Gavin at 8 o'clock and House Hunters at 8:30 and Grow, Cook, Eat at 9, we will have entire channels dedicated to these topics. Hundreds and hundreds and thousands of these channels. And as Fionnuala is a voracious consumer of video content, she just cannot get enough of it. And she is only one person. Guess what? There are 7 billion other humans all on this earth and all looking for content. Very briefly, we'll have news channels, we'll have beauty channels, we'll have DIY channels, fitness channels, real estate channels, investing channels, and shopping. Shopping, 90% of all shopping will be done online. You couple that with excellence in digital marketing and data analysis, and guess what? You've got a huge opportunity for us all here. Who's going to produce all of this content? My contention is that we will, Waterford will, or Waterford at least can. And here is the vision. Imagine something along the lines of the old Dell factory that was taken over by Troy Studios in Limerick. But instead of fitting it out to do Game of Thrones-like productions, we built several smaller studios where a whole host of production companies can set up and start churning out content like no one else. A whole different area that producers can come in and that they can build their own channels and their own content. I think I just lost my full screen there. And that they can all work together in a shared space, sharing digital marketing, data analysis, and all these other things that we need. Okay, one more try on this. And here in Waterford, you would ask yourself, do we have the possibility to do this? Can we do it? And I will say that, yes, of course we can do it because we're already well ahead in this field. Not many people know, but Waterford is already third in the country in terms of TV production, lagging only behind Dublin and Galway, and are very well placed to take the next step into this area of niche channel production. Until the COVID-19 interruption, Nematon TV, my own company, has producing one video every working day since 2014 for a company in New York called Adorama, a photography retailer. Can we replicate that? Well, of course we can. A big block of smaller studio spaces churning out videos day in, day out, serving the insatiable appetites of worldwide audiences. This explosion in content has the potential to make Waterford a leader in this area and the potential to bring in tens of millions worth of business. And wouldn't we all be happy if that happened? Fionnuala would be happy, and all the businesses in the area would be happy, and all the job seekers would be happy, and the new University of the Southeast would be crowned king as their graduates all became leaders in this area of web production and niche TV channels to serve a worldwide audience. And that, to me, is very, very achievable with what we have here in Waterford. And that, Acharta, is my vision of the massive future potential of media in Waterford.
Brilliant, Ariel. Thank you very much for that. That was hugely insightful, as somebody has actually said there in the comment section. So I just want to acknowledge, yes, we are running a little bit over time, guys. So just for the next panel, we're going to take about 5 to 10 minutes now just to do a few questions. So I know you're patiently waiting, but I think it's worth kind of getting through the couple of questions that are coming through here. Let me just take a look. So one of the questions that has come up Let me see. We've got a question here from Jim Gordon just in relation to how are we to attract people here and convince them that this is a region that you can work from, be it remote or otherwise. And he's just talking about the fact that he saw an article about staycations in Ireland, which didn't include Waterford, and a radio programme which also talked about staycations and didn't acknowledge Waterford. So some frustration there definitely from Jim in relation to that. Any ideas in terms of how we can promote Waterford, and what is it that we're doing in terms of our marketing? He's wondering, where do you think we're going wrong? Maybe Ariel, you might take that because you're the one sort of speaking about media there. Is there somewhere do you think that Waterford is going wrong in terms of placing itself in that national conversation?
I think it's a much broader topic than we can address here today, Zara. I think that there is a general kind of lack of representation in official Ireland's minds about Waterford, and that is something we seriously have to address. We're poorly represented at national level, and it's never just enough for us to be doing all this great work, as you have seen today here from all the contributors on the ground. Something more is needed, and there is a big push needed at national level to just, people just to need to know and need to get Waterford more embedded into their consciousness.
Yeah, Sandra, do you have some thoughts on that? You're nodding there. Oh, is Sandra there? She's frozen.
Yeah, no, I agree exactly.
Oh, you're here, yeah.
Oh, I'm there. Yeah, no, it is a very broad question, and we do need to look at, what we're doing in terms of the marketing of Waterford and all. There's so many different versions of who are we trying to market to. So, if we're trying to market to businesses, we have to go one way. If we're trying to market to, the best talent that we want, people want different things. It depends on people's motivators as well. So if somebody is motivated by money and they can get a big job in Dublin, it's going to be very difficult to get them down to the southeast. If somebody is motivated more by a better way of living and a better work-life balance, then obviously we're a shoo-in to win that. And when it comes to other areas, because we've got that, it's a very difficult question to answer. And I know people have been making strides. We've been trying to, all in our own individual businesses, we've been trying to promote Waterford as the place to be, as a place to live. But I do think we need to get an awful lot more support in order to do that, because it's very disheartening sometimes to read the newspapers and think that, south of Dublin, nothing happens. I think we need to make sure that as a region we're pushing ourselves and promoting ourselves. I'm not a marketeer. I don't know how to do that. But I'm sure on the call today, people will have their own ideas. And I think if we came together as a collective and looked at what we could potentially do, there is a way. It's not insurmountable. We can do it. We can make sure that Waterford is put on the map, but it's just how do we go about doing that? And I think we need to steer as businesses here ourselves on how we go about it.
I think an interesting thing as well, not that it's kind of separate to this, but I have noticed anecdotally, even myself, I know friends of mine who had jobs in Dublin who have relocated to Waterford since the pandemic, who are able to work remotely for their Dublin-based companies now, and including actually friends who've moved back home to Tramore and are enjoying the beach in Tramore on their lunch break, and they're able to do the job that they were doing in Dublin, sitting in traffic every day trying to get in and out to an office. And I mean, they're sort of working with their employers now to see how that they can continue to do that work sort of post once we come out of lockdown, which I think is an interesting one. There's just one or two other questions coming in that I want to just take a quick look at. Seeing here now, if 60% of future jobs are being created now by new technology, should traditional degrees be replaced with micro credentials? That's a question from Derek Blackweir. Who would like to take that one? Maybe Heather?
Oh, I did. I just disclaimer. I just wouldn't be an expert.
Okay, that's fine. No, that's fine. Anyone else have any thoughts?
No, that's
on
fine.
that?
What I would say though is that collaboration between third level education and second level education and business is very strong in Waterford actually. But to address that question, that should absolutely be an agenda to make sure that we don't just keep doing the traditional courses. And, it's not the first time, maybe the reverse of that or the inverse of that question of, college graduates are not fit for purpose for the workplace, both on a softer work ethic perspective and also skills and capability. So that level of collaboration just has to be a dominant activity. But on the technical input on that, I would definitely refer to somebody else maybe.
Can I jump in there, Sarah? I mean,
Yeah,
we
go
run
for it, yeah.
we run a level 8 course here in partnership with WIT and do with the Ross and Gaeltachta, and what we're seeing WIT actually doing is that they're going to move towards a series of elective modules where people can actually choose a whole lot of different modules and pick and choose and bundle them all together to have a degree. And there's a lot more practicality and a lot more practical training and preparation in that for people for industry and for collaboration with industry. But the cohort don't lose out because they only do 1 or 2 modules, because they can gather them all together and assemble them to have a degree at the end of the day.
That's brilliant. One more final thing now before we move on to the next panel, because this is actually a really interesting point that just came in here from Rob Cass, who's saying, could we make Waterford the capital of creativity and startups for Ireland? The relocation loan from the Waterford credit unions for up to 50k to relocate is a superb example of what's possible. How do we get that message out there? And he says, do we hire Waterford Whispers News, which is obviously, as you know, a great Waterford business too.
Or hire Rob Cass.
Or hire Rob Cass, exactly, yeah. But I mean, that is an interesting point about sort of the branding of Waterford and how you kind of identify it, and you know that we kind of sort of label it as, you know, the startup capital. Like, that's a very interesting point. If you want to pick up on that.
I would absolutely love. Oh, sorry, Heather, go ahead.
Not at all, Sandra. No, go ahead.
No, I was just about to say I would absolutely love that. It's one of the things that I was mentioning when I was saying, you know, we need to make Waterford the place to be it the tech hub, be it the startup centre. Why not? You know, why can't we, you know, push Waterford towards that and look at that as an end goal for something that's going to happen maybe in the next 3 years time or the next 5 years time. How we would do that, I'm sure Rob obviously would know how we would do that. Waterford Whispers, very good. I love a good guerrilla marketing campaign, actually. I think if we got Waterford Whispers on the case, I'm sure we'd get the word out there fairly quickly. But yeah, I think we have to have those big ambitions. You know, we have to have those big global ambitions. You know, stop looking at the reasons as to why we can't do things and go, yeah, we can. There's absolutely no reason why we can't. Let's get our head down and figure out how we're going to do it. So I would love that. I think that'd be a fantastic idea if we could make that come to fruition.
We have so much potential here in Waterford. If we can just get it all together in one huge effort, we'll be unstoppable.
Exactly.
I think that's what's happening here today, though. I have to say, I do think we're bringing a lot of those great ideas here, and everyone is connecting with one another and sharing them. So I think this has actually been a very productive morning so far. Thank you, guys. We're going to move on to the next panel. Stay with us. There might be more questions that'll come up towards the end. So if you can hang on in there, that would be brilliant. And the last question does bring us on quite nicely into this next panel, because we're talking about position and place. And you'll see Michelle joining us here. Michelle Clancy, Michael Kelly and Michael Walsh are our 3 panelists for this discussion. Michelle is going to begin. She's a WIT PhD student. You're going to begin, Michelle, by chatting to us a little bit about the development of an innovation quarter in Waterford. I'm looking forward to hearing this.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to share my screen with you, Zara, if that's okay.
Fantastic.
You can just let me know when you can see that. I will I'll start my slideshow there. Whoops.
There you go. That looks great.
Are we good to go?
You're good to go. You're good to go.
Wonderful. Okay, great stuff. So good afternoon at this stage. I'm going to speak to you today, as Zara said, about the development of an innovation quarter in a modern city centre, focusing on the experience, challenge, and also the potential, most of all the potential of Waterford City's cultural quarter, which is, for anyone who doesn't know, the cultural quarter is located in the O'Connell Street area. My name is Michelle Clancy. I'm currently undertaking a PhD at WIT under the supervision of Dr. Eugene Crahan and Dr. Tom O'Toole, and with the support of Waterford Council through the Local Enterprise Office and also Waterford Cultural Quarters offices. You can see on screen there the title of my research, and the aim of this research is to increase innovation capabilities within Waterford's economy with a view to creating an innovation footprint in its cultural quarter. Now, there's a lovely piece of Waterford Wall street art on O'Connell Street. If anyone hasn't seen it, it's a fabulous piece of work. There are 2 strands to my research. The first, which is currently underway, is to research the creation and development of an international innovation quarter, to have a look at international examples and then explore their applicability to Waterford. And the second, which I hope to commence later this year, public health guidelines notwithstanding, is an action research project to work with a community of stakeholders in the Waterford area to identify and implement actions and projects aimed at increasing innovation capacity in Waterford. So just in terms of that group, I will speak about it later, but if anybody is interested, the idea is that the group will be industry focused and will include members of the entrepreneur community, anchor companies and research institutes, as well as the public sector. And the aim is really to build upon Waterford's innovation ecosystem, which, judging from the interaction here this morning, is already thriving, but to look at identify where gaps and barriers exist, where positive actions can be taken and changes made, and then in collaboration with the public and private sector stakeholders to implement some of those changes. So my current work is to look at some urban innovation ecosystems internationally, and then the innovation districts and quarters that these ecosystems have helped to develop. These quarters, they're really the science parks, the Silicon Valleys of the 21st century, just on a smaller urban scale. Some of the earliest examples would have been in Boston and Barcelona, people might be familiar with. And they're very much associated with urban rejuvenation in rundown cities, particularly the US Rust Belt cities and a lot of northern cities in the UK. The difference from the science parks, the Silicon Valleys, to these quarters is that they're living, breathing communities rather than compounds of research, sterile, remote areas. They're areas also where placemaking projects were used to create shared value amongst the communities. So think market district rather than financial district. What these quarters have in common with each other, and also with areas of Waterford City around the cultural quarter, is that they're usually created in physically compact, declining inner city areas, often close to a waterfront. All of these quarters started out in underutilised areas, particularly older industrial areas. And then through a partnership approach with the public sector and industry, these areas were reimagined and rebuilt to help deliver commercial impact, particularly by strategically concentrating knowledge-based activities, such as startups, accelerators, and also incubators in that area. The idea is having a sense of community close to that idea of having a sense of community close to your workplace, having a lifestyle close to your workplace has never been more relevant as we're all locked into our 5 kilometres. One focus of my research will be how to increase the innovation capacity of Waterford's cultural and creative industries, potentially then using the geographical area of the cultural quarter as a base to create this innovation footprint. And just to point out, when I speak of the cultural and creative industries, I'm specifically referring to those parts of the economy where creativity is produced and distributed through industrial means and may have commercial value, either through direct sale to consumers or perhaps as an intellectual property. So think the convergent digital technologies, sectors often classified in the past as ICT, but as I see it, with a huge creative aspect to their work: web design, UI, UX, software design, games, post-production, visual effects, and also the content creation industries. I was delighted to hear Ariel speak about them with such passion. But those industries, including those who produce content for new platforms, such as AR, VR, and XR. Just in terms of placemaking, because that is the focus of this panel, that creative, innovative economy holds enormous potential to add value to Waterford, first of all, the cultural quarter, but also the entire city, and particularly in the context of the North Quays redevelopment. Just to look at some of the internationals I have been examining, the development of Copenhagen's cultural quarter, it put Danish architecture and design front and centre in its placemaking strategy, but it also made it an integral part of its tourism strategy by developing the Danish Architecture Centre, which is a visitor attraction and cultural centre. Now, immediately when I look at this, I think of Waterford Distillery, Waterford's maritime history, both rooted in the cultural quarter, and also that potential to develop Waterford as a city of glass. Again, glass making having originated in the O'Connell Street area. They immediately spring to mind for me. And there's a lot of work being done at European level with cultural tourism, but it's an area that the Irish sector is in no way exploiting to its full potential in terms of driving co-creation industries and the value of creative tourism. If anyone has an interest in this, I would urge them to look at the work of Dundee City Council in regenerating its waterfront place as an urban space and tourist attraction. Rob Cass was mentioned earlier. Rob, if you're listening, have a good look at what they're doing there. It's fantastic. Another point I would like to draw your attention to is, or another area, is the Oxford Road corridor in Manchester. Quite common with these innovation quarters internationally is the use of cultural institutions and events to support innovation and interaction, as well as create this sense of place, this sense of vibrancy. Now, again, this area of Manchester would have a strong programme of social and cultural activities extending into evenings and weekends that would support the work of the Innovation Quarter and help to make that innovation visible and interesting to the community at large. Again, there's huge resonance with Waterford Cultural Quarter. Waterford Walls, as I used one of their images earlier, has created stunning artwork, and there are wonderful plans within the Cultural Quarter to create a weekend market, ongoing arts events, public realm projects, community projects. There's significant potential to support and develop our digital creative economy here by making it public and an integral part of the community, as well as bringing our creative people together through programming and also the greater community together. Finally, the creation of shared spaces or hubs is often crucial to encourage that sense of community and place and to drive innovation and creativity. I give the example here of the Dingle Creativity and Innovation Hub, but there are many examples nationally and internationally of these specialised co-working spaces and services which offer an enhanced network of contacts and supports, as well as physical space. This is something that the Cultural Quarter could significantly benefit from, both in terms of providing physical space and facilities for innovators in that digital creative sector, but also making innovation visible, making it accessible as part of its placemaking strategy. It's that sense of building a neighbourhood community and encouraging interaction rather than building a building. And that's really what creates and drives Innovation Quarters. And just in terms of these hotspots of interaction, I know an awful lot of the focus today has been around the benefits of working from home and how we've all adapted. There is definitely a cohort of people who want to collaborate, who need to be in a building together. So I think there's a lot of people looking to get back into a shared space as well. In terms of that collaboration, particularly within the creative sector, it creates alchemy. But also what has been seen in these Innovation Quarters internationally is that with the correct networking and the correct marketing, again, something has been mentioned earlier this morning, that's what drives in investment. So I'm really doing my best to stay up on time here, Zara. That was really a whistle-stop tour of my research into how this partnership approach between the public and private sectors can be used to unlock innovation potential, particularly of historically run-down locations, in order to stimulate growth, stimulate job creation. Post-pandemic, absolutely, we'll be looking at a changed world, and many sectors, both the public and private, they'll be forced out of their comfort zone in a lot of ways, particularly in how we collaborate, how we work together to kickstart sectors of our economy. I'm conscious that I'm completely up on time, probably well over us, but if anyone is interested in my research as it progresses, and particularly the plans around collaboration and bringing stakeholders together in the Waterford area, I would be delighted to speak to you. Thank you.
Michelle, thank you so much. That is fascinating and so interesting to hear the in-depth sort of analysis and the difference it can make, and even looking at those comparisons with other European countries and seeing what we can really do. There's huge potential there. So thank you so much. I know there'll be lots of questions on that. We are now joined by Michael Kelly. You can see there Michael is here from GIY Ireland. Michael's going to talk to us about the future of food, health and well-being, how we can ensure that Waterford is a place where quality of life is central to our working lives. Looking forward to this one, Michael.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Hope you can see that screen coming up there now.
Yeah, we can do if you go into full screen mode.
Yeah, great stuff. Okay, so good morning, everybody, or I think it's afternoon at this stage. So delighted to be here, and thanks very much to Richie and the team, the LEO, for asking me to speak on this topic. So I'm run an organization called GIY, so talking about the impact of food on our planet and our own health, I suppose, is something I'm very, very passionate about. Just, I suppose, to consider the big picture. First of all, I suppose COVID has, rightly taken all of our attention over the last year, but the climate crisis hasn't gone away. If anything, I think it's probably accelerating and getting more existential by the day. And food, I suppose, is an area that, or is an aspect, I suppose, of the climate crisis that often gets overlooked and plays a huge part in overall in putting a strain on our planet. And to give you a sense of how that shapes up, it's responsible for, the food system is responsible for around 35% of greenhouse gas emissions. and really significant proportions of our water usage and the biodiversity loss that we see happening around us. And even though the food system has done a remarkable job of lifting people out of poverty, food poverty, it's not feeding our people perfectly. Let's just put it that way. So we have globally, at either end of the scale, we've got 2 billion people who are starving. We've got 1 billion people who are overweight or obese. And on top of all of that, I suppose we've to find a way to feed another 2 billion people by 2050. So we've got huge problems. And I suppose we talk about, the challenges that the impact of our food system will cause for our own health and wellness, and our lifestyles. But of course, there's a much bigger issue there around our survival as a species that we need to be really, really conscious of at this stage. And I think people feel sort of overwhelmed by that, and lacking maybe the confidence or the knowledge to take action, or feeling a little bit, what will any changes that I can make have on such vast problems. But I suppose if food is a huge part of the problem, it's also a huge part of the solution. And I think there's a sort of an alignment happening between the health, what health professionals are telling us about the diets that we need for our own health, and what climate scientists are telling us about the diets we need for planetary health. And effectively, what we need is a plate, a global plate, I suppose, that has way more plants on it. In GIY, we're not anti-meat, as anyone who's visited Grow HQ will know, but certainly we all need to be eating more plants and probably less and better meat. We need to follow the seasons better than we do, and eat food that's in season in our locality at any given time. Obviously, huge problems with food waste in Ireland and globally, and unnecessary food packaging. And our solution as an organization has always been to get people to grow some of their own food, not necessarily as a self-sufficiency gig, but more so because what it does is reconnects you with your food in a very substantial way. We call that food empathy, and we think that's a huge part of the solution. If we can reconnect people with where their food comes from, it has a huge impact on the food that they consume and buy. And ultimately, what that means, if you can eat food that's either grown by yourself or grown locally, that's in season, that's coming from living healthy soil, then what you're doing is eating food that's at its most nutritious, its most sustainable, and thankfully and happily, it's most delicious as well. And as it says in the quote there, globally, there's a consensus that unless we change the way we eat and what we eat, we've no chance whatsoever of achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Waterford, I suppose I have a slight outsider's perspective on Waterford, in the sense my parents were from the city, but I grew up in Meath and only moved back here about 15 years ago. And so, Waterford is an absolutely amazing place to live and work. And like I think it was Sandra mentioned earlier on, when she, being told you really need to go to LA or Silicon Valley or whatever to create, a tech company. We were told the same when we wanted to start Grow HQ. We were told you really should do that in Dublin. And of course we didn't want to do that. We wanted to create it where we live and have a connection to. We've got some amazing examples, I suppose, in Waterford of food businesses that are really, leading edge in terms of sustainability. And I'm just picking 3 examples from loads of potential examples. Sarah and Seagull Bakery, not just returning the idea of a bakery to our high street and sourdough bread, but also really focused on where the wheat and the spelt she's using has come from and grown locally and so on. Our own project in Grow HQ in Ardkeen, which is obviously about creating a closed loop food system based around sustainability principles. And the last picture there is Willie Drone from Cumra Mountain Lamb. Again, that idea of meat that's produced in a really regenerative, sustainable way. And there's loads of other examples like Flavin's, particularly with their organic porridge oats. Ardkeen obviously really focused around, supporting small producers and suppliers and so on. So I think, it's way beyond time for action at this stage, but I really passionately believe that Waterford can absolutely own this space, become a global leader and certainly a national leader when it comes to sustainable food. And I think, when we think about this in GIY, we think about it in kind of 4 areas: food production, food tourism, food education, and food enterprise. But all of those things underpinned by, sustainability principles, but also regenerative agriculture principles. And I think if we embrace those 4 aspects, underpinned by that principle of being kind to the planet, we can create an absolute, leadership space for ourselves in this area, create lots of jobs, but do so in a way that's not hurting the planet. And I think, that can only enhance the quality of life for our citizens into the long term. And the beauty of this is, as several of the speakers have mentioned before, consumers want this. Like, it's absolutely there for the taking as one of the many things Waterford can become, synonymous and known for in the future. Back to you, Zara.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that, Michael. And I think as well, your business is a very good example as we just talk about media and attracting attention to Waterford. Grow HQ is something that has generated a lot of interest in Waterford based on the work that you've been doing. Actually, and I was speaking to somebody only just yesterday who mentioned your name to me from the RT Guide, who said he'd been chatting to you recently about the work you were doing and stuff. So it's interesting that type of work, and a lot of people watching today should consider that. Maybe I'm speaking at it from the perspective of being a journalist, but I do think that if you're watching today and you have a business and your business has an interesting story, don't be afraid to try and pitch that story, because that's the type of stuff that can put Waterford in the national media, and that's the type of stuff that can really start a conversation about Waterford. Examples like exactly what Michael is doing at Grow HQ, and then he also touched on the Seagull Bakery and the work that they're doing. All those types of backstories that you mightn't think are particularly interesting generally can be quite interesting to media in terms of getting your position in features in weekend magazines and publications and things like that. So a lot of that stuff is worth thinking about. So thank you very much for that, Michael, much appreciated. Our final panelist today is Michael Walsh, who's joined us there. He's the Chief Executive of Waterford City and County Council. Michael's going to talk to us about the future in Waterford and the next 50 years and the potential for Waterford, Michael, I suppose in terms of a place to live, work and visit, what it can look like and what we can do to make that happen.
Thanks, Sarah. I got the easy question, obviously. It's difficult to envisage what something will look like when you know you'll be dead, is the way I put it. But I think the biggest thing, it's actually very difficult to envisage when you think about the level of change that has occurred in society generally around the whole sort of digital era in some respects in the last sort of 20 or 30 years. To try and figure out where we'll be societally or in the context of a place like Waterford in 50 years' time is very difficult. So I think we have to take a slightly narrow window. But I think it absolutely emphasizes above all else the need for adaptability, because change is going to be the big space here. Life has completely changed in the last 20 or 30 years. When you think about the fact that somebody went away to college 30 years ago and you saw them next Friday, they came back or whatever, and the level of connectivity and the level of contact generally that was viable. And yet we're now sitting here in a space where I'm sort of sitting in the Blackwater Valley at the moment, and whether I was in Singapore or Australia or whatever in terms of how I'd be doing my job has completely altered. And we need to, I think in those terms. Globalization is a phenomenon that has been obviously happening very, very significantly over the past while. I think it is inevitable that the likes of the pandemic, if anything, is going to push it even further forward, simply because of all these issues that the lads have addressed in the previous presentations around everything from remote working to how business is going to be done, and all of that is actually going to feed into that whole sort of one big world space that we operate in now, as distinct from what we're we were a small island with 2 TV channels 30, 40 years ago. We're just in a completely different space. Ariel would have touched a little bit of that a while ago, and we need to think of it in those terms. And I think so, in some respects, it's when you look back at Waterford, that is the challenge for us in many respects, is to think internationally and not to think insularly. And even if you look at our heritage, there were probably 2 significant periods of prosperity in Waterford. One was in the 1700s, and you can see the Mall and City Hall and Bishop's Palace and places like that reflected that prosperity. And that was built on internationalization, ironically. It was the time when the fishing fleets in Newfoundland were fed from Waterford. It was the time when the port in Waterford was exceptionally active, and it was the time when Waterford was one of the main connectivities with the UK primarily at that time, but the UK was a long way away in the 1700s. And we need to, in some respects, be thinking of that. And far more recently, I suppose, even though I think it's given us some of our problems, if we're honest about it, I think the Waterford Crystal phenomenon brought another era of prosperity in some respects, at its demise now equally in some respects. But nonetheless, if you think 20, 30, 40 years ago, Waterford was at the absolute cutting edge and selling crystal the world over, all driven from Waterford, made in Waterford, and completely international in its aspect. The volume of crystal that was sold in Ireland or Waterford was irrelevant in the context of what was happening on a worldwide basis, and that attracted a lot of other companies at that time to Waterford. So we don't have to look too far to see this need to have that external outlook and that internationalization, and that's where I'd want Waterford to be in 20 years and 10 years and 50 years. It doesn't matter, that we're not insular, that we're outward looking, and that we're looking to find our place in life. And I think the big point that I'd say in that is that in that big global world where you can do anything from anywhere, it will be that which makes you unique will determine how you succeed or otherwise. And I think we need to just think a little bit about that and build on those uniquenesses or those strengths in many respects. I don't think in that world a place like Waterford can be good at everything. We have to be good at certain things, excellent in niche areas, and then build on that uniqueness. And some of those are the attributes of your people, some of those are the attributes of your geography. And we live in an absolutely wonderful spot, like where, we give out about the weather and a lot of other things, but in relative terms, this southeast corner of the world, with the Cumbraes on one side of us and the sea at the other, and the city at one end, and Blackwater Valley and rivers, and all that goes with that. It's a pretty unique spot, fertile land, everything going with it. So there's a whole host that we can build on there. And to me, it is about being adaptable, a city and county that's adaptable, that's global, that's European, that's ever more important as it is now, recognizing that we have a micro city in world terms, but a micro city with the potential to be a leader for the Southeast, and this niche area that actually brings more potential in some respects than it does in some larger cities, because that scale is a strength in its own right in terms of getting people to partner, like we're doing here today, in terms of learning from each other and acting together cooperatively, ensuring that essential livability and sustainability that we have, that we can communicate it and that we retain it above all else. Whether it's new business, whether it's talent we're seeking to attract, have no doubt, but they will only go where sustainability is proven in the future. That's the movement that's happening in popular terms and every other way right now. And we must be on that train, as the way I describe it, in terms of making things happen. Connectivity, we all think immediately when you think that's about infrastructure, it's about broadband, it's about roads, it's about more than that, it's about people. And we must create a space and spaces in Waterford city and county where people can connect, where we can have experiences, where we can enjoy the great outdoors, where we can really derive value from that livability and that people can connect with each other, because that's going to be the future. This work-life balance, this revised working environment of remote working, yes, it's going to mean that the digital space and working from home and all the other things are there, but it's equally going to be a challenge on the other side to ensure that life experience is enhanced by your location and by what we have to offer. So when we think in terms of what we're doing here, we need to provide services for people, for example. Your livability will be determined not just by the sun that's out there today or the environment that you're in. It's about, you know, is the health service available to you? Is the retail service available to you? Is any of the other services that normal human living, you know, the culture that Michelle was referencing, and that quality of life, the coffee, the smaller things, all of those things that add up into what makes living comfortable in many respects. They're the spaces that we have to be exceptionally strong in. And in many respects, I'd be, you know, another service I should mention is education, for example, a very fundamental one. And obviously, University of the Southeast is absolutely critical in that space. And it being an adaptable institution, because somebody asked the question earlier, can this happen on the basis of traditional degree models and otherwise? I think they'll be blown away in 10 years, to be honest about it. But what won't be blown away is the need for knowledge and the need for education. So the challenge is for us to maintain that adaptability and to ensure that those services, those things that affect quality of life are going to be available to all of us, and that we create adaptive spaces. Who can say, for example, in terms of property, that the office model that has existed up to now is going to continue to prevail, that the retail model that Ariel would have referenced is not going to be under challenge? Doesn't mean there won't be a need for retail services. It's just that they'll be different and they'll have to be experiential, and that's true across the board. So to me, the big challenge is adaptability, and it's about us, you know, making ourselves the location of choice by our actions, by our collective actions, because it's we who will determine our success in the future, nobody else. And depending on anybody else to do it isn't going to work for you. So the challenge is to make us that. And there are simple little questions in that, for example. Like, can we be one of the most welcoming places in the world? Can we genuinely welcome diversity? Can we genuinely welcome others with an open mind, open heart, regardless of where they're coming from or what they're bringing with them in many respects? And if we can demonstrate some of those attributes, and I believe they're there in spades in Waterford, then I do think that we create this unique spot and genuinely find its place in that world order that is just becoming more and more one world, is the way I describe it. So they're the things I'm sort of thinking about in terms of, there's a lot more day-to-day jobs in terms of getting there. Yes, we must do the North Keys. Yes, we must ensure that we develop our tourism. Yes, we must ensure that we make our spaces and places better all the time. But I think the bigger thing is about people. It's about how we operate, how we set our standards, and how we sort of, in our actions, we'll sell Waterford in the longer term, and in our outlook is the way I describe it. So they're just a ramble of a set of wandering thoughts at one level, Zara, but to me, they're the bigger picture. I'd be very hopeful for Waterford. I genuinely think there's phenomenal opportunity there. And I do think that the next 10 or 15 years can bring another one of those eras of prosperity that have prevailed previously.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating to talk about the 1700s and to talk about the sort of the evidence of that we see in the city, and then you talk about Waterford Crystal, and it is companies, Michael, as well, I suppose, like Nearform, who are the new generation Waterford Crystal. They're working in a digital space, but they are that sort of next generation for Waterford in terms of those big companies. So I might just ask Michelle and Michael Kelly to join us again with their cameras on for the quick Q&A. I know we're 15 minutes left to get through a couple of questions, and we've got the closing remarks as well. So bear with me, I'm just going to have a quick look here. There was a couple of questions that did come in as you guys are chatting. A quick question from Michael Kelly regarding food production. Waterford and the Southeast are renowned for premium food quality and production. How do contributors think a unified food strategy can be achieved between producers and consumers, and what groups should be targeted firstly to get such a strategy off the ground?
Nice easy follow up there, Matt. Thanks.
Yeah.
I think the way to think about that perhaps is to think about what each of the parties there want out of this. So I think consumers, are primarily they're interested, increasingly interested in food that's healthy for them. A huge move towards that. There's obviously a huge move towards responsible living and consuming brands that are more sustainable. Also brands that have a purpose, is a huge trend for consumers. And I think when it comes to food, they're also after engaging experiences, food experiences, as Michael mentioned, that engage them and delight them and is part of a discovery. And I think then food producers, like if they're interested in the sustainability space, I think they need education and knowledge around that, because it's not necessarily something that's that a huge amount is known about. It can be very complex to produce food, in an authentically sustainable way. So I think they need grounding in the principles and education. They perhaps need facilities, commercial kitchens and access to shared spaces like that, and obviously, networking and mentoring and business supports that the LEO does so well. And fundamentally, I think when it comes to linking those two things, then what consumers need and the food producers need, I think it needs a physical space to do that. And I think that's where the potential to join all those dots I was talking about earlier on around, food education, tourism, production, and consumption. I think you could do that brilliantly in a physical space in Waterford, and hopefully we'll be able to, couple of projects that we're talking to the council about that will hopefully bear fruit before too long on that front.
Brilliant. We look forward to hearing about those. Another question here from Michael Walsh. Are there any spatial or land use implications or initiatives which could be implemented to ensure or encourage economic growth, vitality and diversity, and to encourage employment creation and growth? A lot of questions in there, Michael. But I suppose, look, do you think, is there any initiatives or anything that, could really make a huge difference at the moment that people could be getting involved with or supporting?
I don't think there's so much spatial issues there in terms of, do we have land and do we have zonings, for example, in planning terms and otherwise, that can cater for an awful lot of this. The reality is I think what we need to find mechanisms for transposing policy, if you want to put it in those terms, into action. And it's about getting stuff to happen, really, is the challenge. And that's the same for everybody, but in our own instance, it's there. So, if it's housing we need more of, and we do need more of it because that brings population, obviously, and there is demand there, I can assure you, we can see that, be it on our housing list or otherwise. Then the question is, but how can we do that competitively so it's affordable so that people can make it happen? So, is it industrial? Is it technological? We have initiatives in the city centre, for example, in terms of the capital culture that Michelle was referencing, or the cultural quarter rather. We have the likes of North Keys. They're all spaces, if you want to put it, that we want to make into places. And it is that challenge. We have plenty of spaces. The challenge is to make them into places, and places that contribute and attract. And it sounds simple, but I can assure you it's very complex. But nonetheless, it is happening. And the challenge is to make more of it happen.
And what are sort of realistic timelines, maybe between yourself and Michelle, you might answer that. What are kind of realistic timelines, for example, when Michelle talks about that innovation quarter, what's sort of a realistic turnaround for that type of stuff?
Michelle,
maybe Michelle might, do you want to?
Sure. Well, in terms of my research, first of all, Zara, the hope is to start to bring stakeholders together, perhaps around the autumn of this year. So much is dependent on public health guidelines. And while this is a wonderful event today and we can do so much through Zoom, that kind of collaboration, it has to take place in a room, I believe. You can only do so much digitally. So the hope on my part is to bring stakeholders together from September onwards. Look at gaps, look at barriers, look at people's own experiences. I'll really be asking people to leave their company hat at the door in an awful lot of ways and bring the benefit of their experience, their own experience to the room. And then hopefully then what we will be looking at then is to begin to identify projects or actions that the group can work on together and collaborate on. But again, COVID is going to affect bringing people together slightly. In terms of the overall space, then Michael could speak a lot more, but there are an awful lot of initiatives already underway in the cultural quarter. It's already starting to come to life, but I'll leave that one to Michael.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's so, Michael.
It's a continuum, but you're generally looking to make a significant difference 2, 3 or 4 years, and it sort of goes on forever, if you know what I mean. But to make the substantive initial difference, it's probably 3, 4, 5 year proposition, if truth be known.
Okay. Yes, it's a process. Well, guys, thank you very much for joining us. That was really informative and brought up a lot of kind of great conversation, talking points about the future and where we're sort of headed and where we can be right now and the progress we can make in this present moment. So thank you very much for joining us. So before we finish up, guys, we're into our last 10 minutes. We're going to be joined now by Richie Walsh, who's Head of Enterprise at the Waterford Local Enterprise Office. And Richie's the one who sort of organised all this and brought us all together. So he wants to a few closing remarks, Richie, a couple of thoughts, I suppose, on what we've heard here this morning and into the afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely, Zara, and thanks a million for facilitating on something that, as far as I'm concerned, was excellent in the thought-provoking elements of it. I think everybody there that's been joining in has pulled a few things out of it that they'll bring away and sort of say, I must think about that, you know, and that's exactly what today was about. I mean, a few points that I'd make, and you know, as from what I got, is first and foremost the whole thing about change, you know, and you know, from here on, as a place, if you like, which is Waterford, but every individual business and operation as well. The whole idea of having the ability to react to change, or perhaps even more importantly, the ability to create change, is instrumental from here on. You know, we can't be stuck in our ways and in our thinking. Further thought, if I can just think back a little bit, you know, some 15 years ago, the council published a document which was a walking strategy for Waterford, and one of the objectives inside that was to make Waterford the walking capital of Ireland. And it might have sounded so ridiculous, and there were things like the development of the Greenway, which was only a sort of a pipe dream at the time. But in the meantime, my God, hasn't Waterford become so it just shows that a vision and a bit of a dream and a push can make reality happen. So when somebody like Sandra and others there have said about, you know, making Waterford the startup capital of Ireland, why not? We just need to put the structures and the thinking and the facilities and like that in place and start doing things like, and I heard about it totally today, about working together for common purpose, cohesive in the way we do things. But certainly collaborative. Doing things on each on their own will get us nowhere, but doing things together will make real inroads. Other things that I would take from today, and you know, I would understand it from our whole Leo ethos and the things we are to do, is the whole idea of online and digital. Simple truth of it is, anybody who doesn't have a commitment to online and digital, anybody in business, is possibly and probably doomed. You know, if we don't have those capacities, we don't have the ability to respond to the needs of consumers that are out there waiting for us to tell our stories to them and to engage with them. Skills development, in my mind, is critical as well. Not necessarily the development and delivery of traditional skills, but the idea of flexible skills, that whole kind of a thing there that, you know, that Ariel was talking about in terms of those modular options within third-level institutions and the ability to shape ourselves and react quickly to different skills needs is hugely, hugely important. From our perspective, you know, there'll be various things that we'll be pushing over the next while, but innovation is a critical thing that Leo will be looking at. The whole idea of supporting firms that are willing to do things better, faster, differently, and to create and develop diversity within the, you know, the product range or the markets or whatever else they're in. So the whole idea of innovation is hugely important. Lean. Lean, if companies ain't lean, they won't survive. And by lean, we mean something like being productive and being efficient in the way you do things. We have a whole range of supports across lean and that agenda that we'd be delighted to make sure that all small firms have. And finally, it's been mentioned here a few times, is the whole idea of the green agenda. Call it circular economy, call it what you like, but the green agenda is not going away. It's not about the composition of government and who's in and who's not in it. The simple truth of it is the green agenda is not going away. So it's an opportunity in a way for that green agenda to be adopted by the likes of Waterford and to become a leader in that agenda. Whether it is for transport systems or for food production systems or whatever else it might be. But the whole idea of developing a high quality green strategy for the county is critical. And ultimately, as pointed out by many people here today, and I note and recognize myself, the whole idea of the quality of life that we have in Waterford is top class. You join that kind of a potential quality of life with high quality educational facilities, high quality startup facilities and services, and join them up with educational facilities, and make sure that the whole thing knits together as an ecosystem. And we have then something that nobody will beat, absolutely nobody. So just then on a final finish, if I can thank a few people then for today, just as a finish up. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the audience that have joined in today in huge numbers and have stayed with the thing right all the way through. But then, why wouldn't they? Because there were brilliant contributions by the panelists here today. Really, genuinely heartfelt stuff and well thought out. So the audience really joined in. And incidentally, if I could just say that there are a lot of questions that we didn't get to, but we recorded those questions, so we'll try and respond to them after the event, at least in small measure. But we'll try and get back to people who have been so engaging in terms of offering those questions and comments and such like. I'd really like to thank Frontline from a technical perspective for delivering this event. It just shows the quality of company we have in Waterford. They do stuff and they run stuff that is way better than the national average. They're the kind of companies we have in Waterford. So thanks a million to Frontline in the preparation, planning and delivery of this event. The panelists, I've mentioned them already, but you'd like to thank them for their enthusiasm and willingness. We asked 9 people to be panelists, and every one of them was so proactively positive in responding positively to our request. So we're delighted with not alone in their willingness, but also obviously what they had to contribute and to deliver. Just in passing, and sometimes we forget, I certainly don't want. I want to thank our own staff of the Leo, the lads that have joined up today and otherwise, for preparing this event, but also for developing a huge program of events for the whole of Local Enterprise Week. Make sure that you look at other events, if you wouldn't mind, everybody. You'll find them if you look at Waterford Local Enterprise Office. If you swing that into Google, you'll find the Leo website, and you'll find all the events that are on for the week. It is Local Enterprise Week. It's a very important week in terms of us developing, pipeline of future interest, or have a look at what's on. I think it's desperately important. I'd also like to thank the Deputy Mayor, who's done the second, Eddie Mulligan, for joining us and being kind enough to do that and to do the closing remarks. Incidentally, two of the people today, two of the panelists today, I'd certainly like to do a call out on in terms of congratulations, and they are Sandra Whelan, who along with David Whelan of Immersive VR were last week voted Waterford's Entrepreneurs of the Year. Huge compliment, but that's kind of a show that they run in terms of Immersive VR. They're an excellent company, so big congratulations to them for that achievement. And as even a follow-up on that, Larry Breen's company, Nearforum, was equally voted Waterford Business of the Year. And no wonder they would, perhaps, you might say, from what they, their international achievements this year. So congratulations to both of those, but to everybody who is soldiering onwards in a business environment in Waterford and doing it so well. So finally, then, if I may, there was one of the comments that came in there, and without being responding to it in any way, it speaks about young people. Is there something that we could do about the creativity of young people? In my mind, today is exactly about young people. It is totally about young people, because it is talking about building a Waterford that is for future generations. And let's be honest, we have that responsibility to build it and to make sure that it's a place where they do want to live, work, and indeed visit. So that Waterford is our responsibility and should be our objective. Finally, then, and I'd like to thank Zara for her contribution today, and for obviously Virgin Media's allowing her to do this event. I mean, she's been excellent in terms of local knowledge of Waterford and what makes things happen here and everything. So Zara, thanks a million. You've been great to us, and we really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Richie. No, I was delighted to be asked, so thank you for asking me to be involved. I'm thrilled. So I know everyone's rushing off to get their lunch, or they've got another meeting. So very quickly, we're going to give the last word this lunchtime to the Deputy Mayor of Waterford, Councillor Eddie Mulligan.
Lovely. Thank you, Zara. It's a great honour and privilege to be here, and I suppose in the midst of some fantastic presentations by some of our best known entrepreneurs here within the city. I'd like to thank Richie for organising today and all the staff of the LEO's office. I would like to also mention Zara, and I suppose like to compliment her as one of our own who does Waterford so proud on the national stage, and particularly I suppose her insight documentaries to COVID over the last 12 months. Well done, Zara. Moving on, I suppose in relation to today, it was fantastic to see in attendees, and I suppose the panel, there was an excess of 100 people here in attendance right through, which consisted of small businesses, entrepreneurs, thinkers and policymakers. So obviously it was great to see everybody hold on right to the end. As Deputy Mayor of the City and County, I suppose we in Waterford Council, and I suppose in government, being a member of the Fianna Fáil party, we're committed to the necessary supports for nurturing businesses and in relation to developing and driving Waterford as the regional capital of the future. And I suppose centre to that in my own politics, I'm very much about quality of life. And it was great also to see that so many spoke about how quality of life is so important in driving forward their businesses. And I suppose the recent investment in seeing the Greenway join the city from Bilberry is emphasis or endorses that. I suppose COVID has changed all our lives, and it's great to hear and listen to the adaptability there of how everybody is coping. So even for me as a councillor and a council executive, we've all had to adapt and change with it. And I suppose listening to Sandra there, she spoke about how all our staff were working from home. That was amazing to actually hear. In relation to myself personally, I feel a little bit old listening to everybody today, insofar as I heard Miguel speak about how everybody's using phones and technology to be here. And I suppose Larry spoke about technology over the last 15 years. And I suppose the work of Nearforum has to be complemented in the COVID app. But if I look back myself, as recent as 1990, I was a young officer on board Eddie Deirdre. There was no mobile phones, and the captain had me completing what we call sailing order reports, and which is a huge document that was actually done by typewriter. Within 12 months then, we were all using word processors, and we had mobile phones out on board all the ships, testing for range off the coast. And now we fast forward to where we are there today. Brian, I had to say, totally compliment Brian on, I suppose, talking about the creative journey and talking about talent. I myself firmly believe in nurturing talent. So bringing that on. Heather as well, I suppose, she's a very true word insofar as she, most emphatic statement to me was interactions will drive how Waterford moves forward. And I think despite all the technology and the limitations of COVID, I suppose personal interaction will be everything. Michelle Clancy on the Culture Quarter, very close to me. I think the CEO will endorse 2012, 2013, when that first became a concept and was being driven forward. So it was great to see Michelle's research on it and give us plenty of ideas. In relation to Ariel and I suppose Nemeton, the opportunities for Waterford from a digital and video platform, it was just so inspiring listening to him. Coming forward to Michael Kelly, great to hear the challenges in relation to the food industry, and I suppose ultimately how the reconnection with the food empathy will drive Waterford forward, and I look forward to hearing more on that. The CEO, as I draw to a close, I suppose, he spoke really about what will dictate our future, and that will be collaboration and working together. And I suppose from a political framework in Waterford, we're trying to deliver an environment where investment will see the North Keys delivered, we'll see the Technological University of the South East delivering better housing. And I suppose even on that respect, we can see the city and the urban areas improving through the lease and repair scheme. Talking about Michael from a council point of view, I believe, listening to you all, I very much heard one common trait, that you need entrepreneurship supported more. And certainly that's something I will be taking away from today. And in relation to Michael, the CEO, talking about the vision of the city, there's one comment I remember from Derek McGrath back at his time as manager. He said, Waterford won't find vision in populist jibes from bar stools. And I think that's very much so. It's going to be up to us, as Michael said, the people of Waterford, to collaborate and work forward. And I suppose summing up on that, my compliments to everyone on their vision. And I think it's appropriate with the Tricolour's 173rd anniversary on Sunday to finish with a quote from Thomas Francis Meagher, insofar as the glory of the old Irish nation, which in our hour will grow young and strong again. Should it fail, the country will not be worth more than it is now. And I think that's very relevant as we move forward as a country and as a county and recover from COVID. Thanks very much, everybody, and well done today.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mulligan. A great summary there, and lovely to hear that recap on what we heard throughout the morning. So that's it for our meeting today, guys. Thank you for joining us. As I say, this has been recorded, so if you want to catch up or recap on anything, that will be available on the Local Enterprise Office's social media accounts. And also remember that this is the start of a conversation that will continue on, so don't be afraid to connect with some of the people that you heard here today. A lot of them said that they were really open to hearing from you and engaging and having that back and forth discussion. So take that opportunity, send that email, make that phone call, and keep the conversation going. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.